Before I begin, let me explain what is happening to me. The technical term for what I have is called Eidetic. You probably heard of people with photographic memory. Well, that's what it is, except edicts are not limited by visual senses in what they remember. While each case varies in specific capabilities, feeling of sounds, taste, smell, and touch can also vividly recall at any time. Some edicts are also known to have the ability to see what they're thinking. This is the category that I belong in. I have to admit, it has its perks. School is a breeze because I can see my notes next to every exam I take. I'm able to bring up happy memories that I've had with friends and families to help brighten their day. Whenever I get bored, I can read books and or watch TV that I've watched in my head. Seems cool, right? At least that's what I thought it was, and people told me that. I wish they were right. What they don't know is I wouldn't give anything. I would give anything at all to get rid of this. The way my vision works is that in addition to what my eyes actually see, my brain overlaps whatever thinking of over this and results in combination of the two. Therefore, the effect of my mental vision is limited during the day because my actual vision interferes with it. But whenever I go to bed and the room is totally dark, my mental vision is the free reign of what I see. Now one might ask, why is this so bad? As long as you keep pleasant things, this might be the very relaxing way to go to bed. This would imply that you have complete control of every thought that goes through your head at all times. This, however, is almost never the case. My brain is constantly bombarded with what are called instructive thoughts. I'm sure you heard of the normal creaks and groans of your house at night, and you think maybe someone is or something is walking around in the dark. Fear swells in you for a few seconds, but after a minute or so of nothing happening, you're able to shrug it off as imagination and go to sleep. This is where instructive thought. Though you know there's nothing there, your brain forces you to think for at least a moment that there is. Except me, these instructive thoughts conjure an image that accomplishes the sounds in every night are always accommodated by some sort of person or creature walking around my room or standing there watching me. Obviously, this made me grow up hard. I couldn't understand any of this when I was young and just assumed that monsters were in my room and I went to bed. Many nights, my parents would rush into my room after hearing my cries and try to console me, even though their presence never made the image go away. Eventually, I couldn't understand that the images weren't real because they were all things that I had seen before, and being able to recognize where came from it had a calming effect I learned to live with, and even anticipate that entities would appear each night until a few months ago. I just got back to my apartment after a long night working at a hospital, and I noticed that my roommate wasn't home. I assumed that he went out at a bar, thought nothing of it, and went inside. As I opened the door to my apartment, the normal darkness greeted me. My mental vision took over as I walked over to the light. Just as I walked over to the light, I saw a man at the end of the hall looking at me. I couldn't tell that he was Image, but for the first time, he was something that I had no memory of. He was extremely fat, had no clothing except a small black bolo on his head, on his balding hair. His skin was light, sickly purplish color, and appeared to peel across his clearly disease-ridden body. His mouth hung open, revealing a set of gangrenous teeth and plus laden stump of a tongue. But the thing that stuck out most was that he had no eyes or even eye sockets. They were replaced with a lump of flesh that seemed to have grown from the edge of his hat. My hands hesitated at the light switch, and my fear temporarily replaced with curiosity. I wanted to see what this man would do if I sat around for a while. He was, after all, just an image. Just an image my brain can conjure up, so I took a seat on my couch and observed quietly. After a few minutes, he started to move. Like all my other hallucinations, his actions made no noise in the real world and suddenly shuffled around my apartment. He didn't seem to be heading towards me at all, nor did he appear to have any clear distinction in mind. I started to lose interest and got up to turn the light and get ready for bed. Then he spoke. A fear that, like which I had never seen, resonated down my entire spine. None of the hallucinations had ever made their own noises, let alone from a word. I tried to rationalize that maybe I heard people talking, either from outside my window or perhaps outside my door. But before I had a chance to validate my claims, he spoke again. She watched to see you again. His voice grumbled and deep. He spoke very quietly, but I've heard every word. Panic took hold of me, and I bolted for the light switch. As always, the light instantly made the man disappear, and I was left alone in my apartment. Relief washed over me, and I tried to make sense of what just happened. I knew the voice coming from the man, but I couldn't figure out how that was even possible. I didn't recognize him from any of my scary movies. I hadn't seen him in any of the pictures on the internet, nor could I recall anyone talking like that. No matter what conclusion I came to, I knew I would see him again when I went to bed. He didn't disappoint. No sooner I had to jump under my covers, he waddled into the room. I tried to distract myself from him by thinking of other things. I resorted to normal tactile of images of my sister to appear calm me down. She was always so understanding, even when we were kids, of what kind of things were happening to me. Her presence made me feel at peace, and I relied on her to get me through some of the more severe episodes. However, her image seemed to have an effect on him. He immediately stopped shuffling and seemed to turn where she was. It was difficult to describe what he did next, but it makes me question my insanity, but somehow forced her to fade from my vision. It wasn't possible. I should have been able to keep her in my vision if I thought of her, but for the first time I couldn't. As soon as she faded, he spoke again. You should have been there. She thought about you at the end. A memory was then thrust into my mind. It was of my grandmother. She had been in the hospital for the last few months of her life, and my dad used to take my sister and I to visit her. My grandmother adored us and absolutely loved when we came to see her. One time my dad was going to visit her. I told him that I wanted to hang out with my friends and he obliged. That was the last time my dad ever went to see her. She died a few days later. I felt horrible for not going and regretted it for the longest of times. These were the feeling of regret and sorrow overwhelmed me, and I suddenly realized that meaning behind the man's words. He somehow able to project the memory that I didn't want to think about and relive my emotions that I felt during it. He visited me every night since. Each time a horrible moment of my life is wrenched from my subconscious, and how I endured the sorrow of each event. Each night I'm unable to cope with the overwhelming surge of emotions, and what little sleep I get is plagued by the nightmares of those memories. I see no end in sight, and I'm at my wits' end. Often the emotional nature of heaven and hell, whether or not there is a God. Originally, I inclined to believe that there couldn't be existence of a God that would allow the torment to be inflicted by a person who seemingly did nothing to deserve it. However, I cannot think of a more terrifying version of hell than this, to be forced to relive and reconsider if each bad decision in one's life is unlimited to the most effective method to push a soul to its breaking point. I can see only one way to escape this. If my family reads this, just know that I love you all and I'm sorry for any pain I caused. Hopefully you understand.